want to talk to you about boundaries. Boundaries. What is a boundary? It's a line that marks the limits of an area. It's a dividing line. It's also a limit of a subject or sphere of activity. So the easiest way to think about boundaries is with kids. So if you have children, you probably set boundaries for them, right? You tell them, if you do this, then that's what happens, or this is what happens. It's a if this, then that rule, right? If you don't clean up your room, then you don't get to watch TV. If you stay out beyond curfew, you're grounded, right? If this, then that. But the key is to keep that boundary. In other words, to uphold it. If the kid does this, you do that, right? Or whatever it is happens. They get grounded, their phone gets taken away, whatever, right? The same goes for adults. But we forget to set boundaries with other people. I see this come up really often around our partners, our family, our friends, sometimes with our coworkers, right? So we have to learn to set boundaries about, around how people speak to us, how they behave around us, how they treat us, right? So this is something I've been thinking about a lot. There are some behaviors that I don't like in someone close to me, and it happens in particular around a certain circumstance. And I, for a while, have just been really pissed off about it. But recently, I had to speak up, and I had to say, if you do this, this is a deal breaker for me, and our relationship will be over. And that's a boundary. When you do this, or if you do that, I'm out, right? So that is a very clear boundary, but I have to then uphold that. I have to say, pay attention, and when they do that, I have to then say, I'm out of here, or say, if you do it one more time, I'm gone, whatever it is. But it's a boundary. That's a boundary. I have had a hard time doing this, and so I get it if you feel like boundaries are tough. So let's go over a few ground rules with boundaries. The first is to actually set the boundary. You have to know the line you're not willing to cross, or that others aren't allowed to cross, right? You have to be very clear about that. And so you can't just say, be wishy-washy and say, well, when you kind of do this, or, I'm not really happy about that. You have to actually say, this is the line. If you do this, that happens. This, that, if this, then that rule, right? So you have to set a boundary very clearly. Person has to know when they cross that boundary, they have to be aware that they're crossing it because you've set it so clearly. The second thing to do is that you have to decide what happens if that line gets crossed, right? So what actually is the repercussion or the consequence of somebody crossing that line, right? Crossing your boundary. So if that boundary is crossed, you know what's going to happen, they know what's going to happen, and then the third thing is you have to stick to it, okay? You have to stick to your word and follow through. That's the hardest part, is the actual follow through and do what you said you were going to do. So I always think of this again with kids. So I had a real problem with my biological children. I would tell them, I would give them a boundary, if this, then that rule. I would set that, and then I wouldn't always follow through. I would renege on it. And that was not good because it taught them that my boundaries were not firm, right? But you want your boundaries to be firm. With my stepkids, it was a little different. We had a list on the refrigerator, I remember, that said, if you do this, this is what happens. If you do this, this is what happens. And we kept them more. It was a little easier for me, but I still didn't always stick to them. I would feel guilty, or my husband wouldn't stick to them, which would cause other issues. So why don't we stick to our guns about our boundaries? And I say stick to our guns because it is almost like you need to stand at that line with your guns ready to fire, right? To say, this isn't happening. You're not crossing that line. If you cross that line, there's a real problem here, right? So why don't we do that? Number one, we don't do it out of fear. Fear that we, maybe we'll be sorry later. Fear of what the other person might say or do. I think it really is mostly a fear that we'll be sorry that we set the boundary and that we kept our word about that boundary. I think the second reason that we don't always stick to our boundaries is a lack of confidence. We just don't feel like we can stand in our power and do what we said we're going to do. That we don't have the confidence that we can deal with the ramifications of that. We don't feel confident speaking up. Any number of kind of self-confidence issues will stop us from keeping those boundaries and doing what we said we were going to do if they were crossed. The third one is lack of self-love. I think we don't stick to our guns when it comes to our boundaries because we just don't love ourselves enough to say, this is not okay. Because a boundary, that's what it is. It's saying, this is not okay. I'm not okay with you doing this, with you treating me this way, with you speaking to me this way, with you, I'm not okay with you cheating on me. I'm not okay with you drinking so much. I'm not okay with you staying out too late, whatever it is. And we don't love ourselves enough to just keep that boundary. And so that's a really important one. So I would love to know what boundaries you feel you need to set. Leave me a comment down below and tell me, what boundaries do you need to set? And what's the ramification if somebody, crosses that boundary? What's going to happen? Leave me a comment and tell me, because I really would love to know. And if you have, comments on that you want to share on how you have kept boundaries, that would be interesting to me too. How have you stuck to your guns? I am Nina Amir. I'm the Inspiration to Creation coach. I am a transformational coach who I offer certified high performance coaching as well as personal growth. Certified high performance coaching is personal growth. I offer that along with spiritual coaching, so spiritual growth. I call that inspired results training or coaching. So I bring personal and spiritual growth together. I feel like you need one to have the other, and vice versa. I do most of my coaching these days through the Inspired Creator community, and the link to that is above if you're interested in getting from where you are to where you want to go faster than you thought possible. If you would like to bring in metaphysical, spiritual, esoteric, mystical topics or information or practices to your personal growth, then the Inspired Creator community is where you want to be. This is where we have a lovely community that has amazing conversations that are meaningful and motivational and inspirational, and that really get us moving towards stepping into our best self and living a life that really feeds our souls. So check out the Inspired Creator community, and until I talk to you next time, set some boundaries and go out there and achieve more inspired results.